Well, welcome back to NRM 638, Python Scripting for ArcGIS Applications. This is an e-learning class at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and it's spring semester 2015. In this session, we're going to work on creating point feature classes. So if you go to the Blackboard website, download this text file, Week 4 Points, from the Week 4 Creating GIS Data folder. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is set our workspace, and I've already got it set to my geodatabase, and then we'll create a point feature class called test points. So I need to set a variable called workspace. That will be my geodatabase container. And then I'll use arcpy.createFeature class to create test points. And here is the key point, which basically is what is the type of our feature class. So that created a point feature class, and if you look at the properties under fields, the only field we have is the object field, object ID, which is created automatically by ArcGIS, and then a shape field, which will be a point shape field because we basically specified that when we created this feature class. So if we open up the attribute table, we don't have any other fields and we don't have any records. So our next step is we could add fields. We're going to skip that step for now, and we'll go to step 3, which will be we'll insert the shape field properties. So we'll use edit points, create a cursor, and then if we go edit points dot, let's see what fields we can edit right now. So right now, the only field we can edit is object ID and shape. So what we'll do is we'll loop for X ranging from 0 up to but not including 10, and for Y 0 up to not including 10. We'll create a arcpy.point object with those XY coordinates. And then we'll insert our count value for our object ID, and then the point object for our shape field. So let's copy and paste this into our Python window, and then press enter to execute that loop. So basically that's what it did, was it went through this loop, and here's what should be in our attribute table. The first time through, this is our feature ID, X and Y of our point. The next time through, this is the feature ID, X and Y of our point, etc. So we'll unlock our table by deleting our cursor object. And then we'll run the ArcPy add XY management pool, and that will add the XY values from our point shape properties to our point attribute table. Okay, and the name of my feature class is test points. So then we could look at that in ArcMap. So here's our test points, and if we look at the attribute table, we've got to add it one more time into our table of contents. So I'll remove, and then we'll add it into the table of contents. So then we have the 4 points we created, and then we extracted from our point shape the X property and the Y property when we executed ArcPy add XY management. Okay, we can also create point feature classes with a spatial reference. So what we need to do is find the code for a geographic coordinate system North American datum of 1983. And the easiest way to find that code is if you go to your data frame and then properties, go to the coordinate system tab, and then go to whatever coordinate system you want to access the code for. So for example, we would go geographic coordinate system North America, and then NAD 83. So if we click on that spatial reference, the well-known ID is the code we want to use. So the code will be 4269. So I can copy that, and then I could paste that in my text file. So it's 4269. So basically what we're going to do is Arcpy create feature class just like before, but this time we'll put in at the end arcpy.spatialreference and then the code. So that creates our test GCS points. And now if we look at it in our catalog, properties, what's the XY coordinate system of this point feature class? So it is in geographic coordinates, North American datum of 1983. Next step is we'll add a field that will be a text field. It'll be 16 characters wide, and the name will be city. Control V to paste. And then we'll make a list of the longitude and latitude of 2 cities in Alaska. So the longitude and latitude of Fairbanks and the longitude and latitude of Big Delta. Okay, so then we could assign an X value for Fairbanks by extracting the first item from our list, which is its longitude, and then create a variable for the Y value, which will be the latitude of Fairbanks. And then we'll make a string variable for the name. And then we'll create a point object. And then the X property of our point object will be negative 147.7287. And the Y property of our point object will be 64.83011. And then we can create a list, and the list will be our town name and the point object in our list. So then if we say, what's the type of row? It is a list, and what is in that list? So here's what's in the list is string Fairbanks, and then a point object, and the point object has this as its XY coordinate. It has no Z coordinate and no measure. And I forgot, I need to create my edit point cursor. So basically we're going to use the data access insert cursor function on our test GCS points, and we will have access to the city field and the shape field. And then we'll create our first row in our point attribute table. So that first row should have this information in the point attribute table. This X string for one field, and then the shape field will be this point. So we'll do the same thing with delta. We'll create a point object. This time I'll do it a little shorter. I'll say point object, take first item in this delta list, which is the longitude, take the second item in this delta list, which is the latitude, and create my point object. Okay, so my list was big delta, it wasn't delta, so I need to use that list. And then we'll make a row, which will be another list. So what's in this row that's a list? So name or string big delta, and then the point object with its X and Y coordinate, no Z coordinate, no measure. And then we'll create our second row in the point attribute table. And then we could unlock, we're all done. So we'll delete edit points to unlock our table. And then we'll add that to our data frame to look at that point feature class. So if we open up the attribute table, we have 2 points, Fairbanks and Big Delta, and we could look at them. So right mouse click, zoom to layer, and we could label our points. So properties, labels, and label each point based on the city field name. So here's Fairbanks and here's Big Delta, and here's the XY coordinate of the point shape Fairbanks down in the lower right hand corner. Here's the XY coordinate of the area near Big Delta. Okay, we could also create multi-point feature classes, and a multi-point is basically many points that have the same row in the attribute table because all the attribute values are identical. So we'll create a multi-point feature class. So basically the keyword here is multi-point instead of point. And then we'll add some fields. And then we'll edit our multi-point feature class and insert points and field values. So we're going to have access to the point shape, and we'll also have access to the point ID field. Okay, so we'll create 3 multi-points. So the first one will have an x-coordinate of 0, a y-coordinate of 0.5. The next multi-point will have an x-coordinate of 3, a y-coordinate of 2.5. And the third multi-point will have an x value of 5 and a y-coordinate of 5. So that's now in this array object that's an Arcpy object. So if we say, what is the type of array points, it's an arc object. So basically an arc object.array. So we'll create a multi-point shape object from our array of points and then insert that into our point attribute table. So basically we'll insert these 3 multi-points and an ID of 100, and that will be the first row in our point attribute table. And then we're all done, so we could delete our cursor to unlock that table, and then we'll add this to our data frame to look at it. So if we look at the attribute table, we do have one row, it's a multi-point, so all 3 of those points have a point ID value of 100, but you'll see there's 3 points that are multi-point. So here are our 3 points. This one has a coordinate of 0 and 0.5. This one has a coordinate of 3 and 2.5. And the final multi-point has a coordinate of 5 and 5 for the x and y coordinate value. Okay, we can also create points that have z property and measures. So z property is typically the depth or elevation of every point, and the measure is typically some sort of measure. So for example, mile markers along a highway or river kilometers along a river, etc. So we'll create our point feature class, and we'll have enable has measures and enable has z properties, so depth or elevation of every point. Indented by accident. Okay, so in this example, we won't add any fields. We'll just work with the shape object or the shape field. So we'll create a cursor called edit points, and then we'll make a point object, and the point object will have x, y, z, and measure properties. So we could type in point dot. So what is the measure property of this point object? Or point dot, what is the z value, the elevation or depth of this point? So our x value is 100, our y value is 200, the elevation is 1,000, and the measure is 234.5 miles, for example. So then we'll insert that into our point attribute table. And then we'll make a second point object with these as the x value, y value, elevation or depth, the z property, and the measure. And then we'll insert that in the point attribute table. Okay, so we just created 2 points. So we'll finish our cursor. We're all done. We'll unlock the table. So we'll delete the cursor to unlock the table. And then we'll run the geoprocessing tool, add XY, which will add the X, Y, Z, and measure to the point attribute table. And then we could add that point feature class to our data frame. Okay, so we have our 2 points. And then if we look at the attribute table, their shape is point ZM because they contain a Z property, they contain a measure. So for example, the first point has an X of 100, a Y of 200. The second point has an X of 200, a Y of 300. but we also have the elevation of every point and then the mile of every point in terms of measures. Okay, so if you go to the Blackboard website, I've got a quiz question for you that will lead you to the next video session, which is on creating line feature